wouldn't it be something if the existing financial system just started to eat Bitcoin, but then Bitcoin managed to transform it? By being adopted, it would change the system that was eating it. Ever since the earliest days of the Bitcoin message boards, people have speculated on what's it going to look like in the future with Bitcoin. And there were some threads here and there which had talked about a kind of Trojan Horse type dynamic where, people had written way back when, like, essentially early 2010s on Bitcoin Talk stuff. You can find kind of anything we discussed today was once discussed back then. But people were like, hey, wouldn't it be something if the existing financial system just started to eat Bitcoin, but then Bitcoin managed to transform it? By being adopted, it would change the system that was eating it. And that was something I picked up on. And I ended up writing an essay in 2021 called Bitcoin is a Trojan Horse for Freedom. And it was the first basically essay I did in a series of essays that later turned into a book and other books and my writing career. And now, yes, you're holding it in your hand, because last year I decided to turn all of that work, which amounts to, 600 pages or so of writing, into a anthology that I would create only 100 copies of and distribute to a handful of people who really helped me on my journey, like you. Thank you so much for having me along the way so many times and, giving me an audience. I've been so grateful for that. And then the other 50 we auctioned at Scarcity, which is super fun. So we're about to mail those copies as well. But for now, there's no other plans to put that writing anywhere else. And what's fun about that book, Trojan Horse for Freedom, is that it's been brought up to date. So it has a new intro by me from last summer. And all of the stuff I wrote in 2021, 22, 23, I had to go back and update, which was interesting. It was a lot of like exchange rate stuff. This particular national currency was worth this much BTC. And it's like today, it's like not doing so well in its own right. Right. So Bitcoin's grown a lot since then. But, I wanted to go back to, the cover of it, the Trojan Horse for Freedom, right? And the theme of it, which is what we talked about in Bedford on stage. And it's interesting because when I first put out the thesis, it was 2021 and, things were heating up, right? So you had MicroStrategy had started, right? About maybe 8 months earlier. You had Block bought some Bitcoin. You had Tesla bought some Bitcoin. And El Salvador hadn't happened yet. That happened a couple months later. But you were starting to get inklings of some of that we would maybe get some nation state adoption. So my thesis was at the time that eventually I just thought that Bitcoin was going to become this obvious reserve asset for the global financial system, and that it would start slow, start here, start there, but eventually build into something that everybody would want and would want to have on their balance sheet, whether you're a sovereign or a large corporation. And I think that has largely happened, right? So what's interesting is that the thesis has played out in terms of global adoption. It's been pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know if I would have predicted that within 4 years, you'd have the United States government, the world issuer of the world reserve currency, establishing a national strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean, that's pretty wild.
I got sent.
Yeah, I actually have one as well. So it's a great hat. I love that one.
For people listening,
it's like, back.
It says strategic reserve. It's got a 3-star, almost like a 3-star admiral or general.
Yeah, I've got one too. So we'll put on the strategic reserve, brilliantly designed by Skylar. But I mean, it kind of happened kind of suddenly. It was, we went from a time where Bitcoin was so niche. We had this long bear market, and, all of a sudden 2020, you started to get MicroStrategy happened, and then everything else happened. Then there was kind of a lag, right? I mean, we had another bear market, right? It was kind of tough for a lot of people, but a lot of stuff kept pushing, right? Mining is fascinating. You have a lot of different countries mining now at the nation state level, like Ethiopia, Kenya, Oman, Bhutan. I mean, this little country, Bhutan, has mined $1 billion of Bitcoin. It's incredible on water that would have just otherwise gone wasted, flowed down the river and not done anything. Instead, they captured that. So you have large scale mining adoption, you have treasury adoption, you have people being exposed to companies like MicroStrategy all over the world, and sovereigns and all sorts of things happening now, and states and governors, and it's getting pretty crazy. And I remember I had this debate somewhere along the way. I think it was in 2021, 2022, with Ben Hunt, who writes Epsilon Theory. Mm-hmm. And we debated over whether or not this was bad for Bitcoin as freedom money, mm-hmm. that it would get adopted by Wall Street and the government. His sort of thesis was that Wall Street would kind of eat Bitcoin, and that it would, I guess, render it pretty useless as a freedom technology. And my thesis was the opposite. I was like, no. Like, it's the Trojan Horse. Wall Street will adopt it, whether it likes freedom or not, simply because of Bitcoin's NGU properties. And what would later happen is Bitcoin would go into the city walls and seek out at night and rewire the city and make it more free. And I really feel strongly about my thesis winning out as of today. I mean, I really feel like what you're going to have happen is Bitcoin be adopted by all these institutions, which clearly most of them are not. We're not sitting here and claiming BlackRock is some kind of human rights activist, you know, clearly not. Like they're in it to do one thing, and that's to make money. But what's fascinating is they become accomplices to human rights activism, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny when you have BlackRock and the Trump administration and even Bukele and any of these governments mining, like, you know, dozens of companies now launching, you know, derivative products that connect to Bitcoin in some way. Almost none of them are doing it like really to like help the vulnerable people. But inevitably, because they're pushing Bitcoin, the brand Bitcoin is this big open network, right? They are inevitably becoming accomplices to making the world more free.